Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of Power Talk. It's a series of videos where I discuss my power analysis, power and heart rate analysis. And for some of you that may be new to power, or maybe you've been using power for a long time, maybe you'll learn something from this video series. And if you're new, I hope the squiggly lines don't make you nauseous. What we're going to talk about today is the 200-kilometer event that I did on Saturday, January the 14th. It's the first in a series of brevets. And for those who do not know what a brevet is, it's an unsupported or self-supported endurance ride. In this case, 200 kilometers, 125 miles with about 7,500 feet of climbing without any support. Now, we did this ride, Lori, Barbara, and myself, we did this ride as a no-no ride. And that is a ride where we do not stop for any reason. So no refueling stops, no nature breaks, just no stopping for any reason whatsoever. Except for, in this case, I took some backup videos in case our cycling computers had an issue or malfunction, because it rained the last 60 miles of the day. So you can do the math. That's about half of the 8 hours of the ride. It was just raining. So I wanted to make sure that the cycling computers captured the data, and I would have a backup with videos at each one of the controls that we were at. A control on a brevet is a certain point on the course where, you know, if you can imagine a baseball diamond, you got to go to first base, then you have to go to second base, then you have to go to third base to get back to home. You can't go from home base to second base, right? So a control on these endurance events is just a point on the course where, you know, maybe the most eastern, most northern, most western point of the course. And there's only one way, if you did the route correctly, that you would get to each one of these controls. So let's look at the training data, the power data. And I always make the disclaimer just because I think it's important. You only want to put out the power that you need. In this case, Barbara, Lori, and myself were off the front the entire day. There was a point on the course at mile 68 where that was the northern and easternmost point, and then we doubled back on a short stretch of road where we could see other riders coming. So as long as we stayed ahead of them, that's as hard as we had to pedal. So, you know, you're not going to see these huge power numbers because it's not necessary. As long as you stay off the front, you ride at the pace that you're comfortable with. But I do want you to notice that there's a lot of consistency from the first part of the event to the second part of the event. And I also broke it up into thirds. So let's take a look. And sorry for the long preamble, but let's take a look. All right. So what we're looking at here is just, you know, you have your file, and this is all the data, okay? And it's basically the data is collected every second, if you will. So if you, and this is important to notice that, or to note that sometimes you will have a spike, maybe in your power or maybe in your heart rate. And so you can go into this data here and then correct it so you don't have erroneous data for that particular ride, or maybe it skews your threshold numbers or anything like that because you've got this anomaly of, you know, 10 to 20 extra, maybe heart rate from like a 175, you're now sitting at 185, and you know that, you know, you don't hit 185 ever, right? So, all right. So here's your summary right? So 7 hours, 55 minutes, 124 miles. Training stress score, basically, you know, for every 100, that's about an hour at riding at full, at your FTP. So, you know, 400 TSS, that means that I was not riding, obviously, at 8 hours at FTP. That would have been a score of 800. So that's nearly impossible, because what does FTP stand for? It's the maximum power you can hold for 1 hour, right? So, all right, so it was a 4,000 kilojoule ride. That's important if you're trying to keep track of your calories. In this case, I ate 2,600 calories, and so I was 1,400 calories in the hole. So, you know, if you're trying to keep your body mass, you want to refuel over the next couple of days. You want to take that back in. IF, intensity factor. This basically says 70% effort out of 100, right? That number is derived from your FTP as well, your functional threshold power. Normalized power of 168. Now, for me, weighing 68 kilograms or 150 pounds, that's about 2.5 watts per kilogram, okay? And that's great. That's where you want to, that's where I want to be for my endurance riding, about 3 watts per kilo or just a little under. In this case, 2.5. The other thing to look at here is I've been dealing with a left leg issue for a while, but that's actually pretty good. 48.6 for my left leg percentage of power and 51.4 for my right leg power. And then this is the heart rate data for the total 8 hours of 139 average heart rate. And the power, the disparity between the 141 and the 168, that's a discussion for another day. But basically, what your body really felt was the 168, not the 141. Okay, so let's drill down just a little bit to some of the other data that we can look at. This is all the different power zones, and you could see here a lot of time here, and that's also because, well, we do a lot of descending if you do a lot of climbing, and so sometimes you just don't have to pedal. But also, you know, we had to slow down to go through puddles because we didn't know what was lurking underneath there, and the water was all the way up to the crank arms. But let's take a look at this, because this is where most people really understand. They don't have power meters, so let's discuss heart rate. This ride, the range of my heart rate between 0 to 144 is considered my zone 1 recovery heart rate. And you could see I spent 5 hours or 65% of the ride at zone 1 heart rate. You know, I don't mean to sound like it was easy. It's just you only have to ride as hard as you have to. And in this case, 65% of the ride, I was in zone 1. Here is zone 2, shows about 34%, and that's my heart rate of 145 to 156. Now, I've been experimenting with my heart rate of zone 2, doing just a regular talk test. Am I breathing heavy? Can I talk throughout the month of December? And this is kind of what I came up with. Anywhere between 145 and 155 heart rate, I can hold a very stable conversation without heavy breathing. Now I want to point this out to you, because this is very, very important if you want to be a successful endurance rider. Notice I only spent about 4 minutes of the entire 8 hours, 1%, of a heart rate above 157 to 165, the tempo range. Obviously, nothing in threshold. There's not even a bar, and there's no anaerobic, nothing. And that, if you want to be a successful endurance rider, you need to learn how to keep yourself in an endurance zone. Zone 2, you know, zone 1. There was 3 of us, so there was some drafting as well. We traded poles throughout the day, or, you know, every couple of minutes or so we would swap out who was taking the brunt at the front of the 3 of us. All right, so let's scroll down a little bit more. And this is power. Now, this is in zones, and it might need a little tailoring because according to this, zone 2, 135 to, you know, 182. I felt fine all day at that power. From time to time, you know, if there's a hill, if there's a climb, you know, your heart rate goes up. I'm sorry, your power goes up a little bit. But even still, I mean, according to this threshold, I was, what, 9% of the entire ride. But generally speaking, and I may need to tailor this a little bit because I think with all the zone 2 training I did, I think I'm actually pushing wattage a lot more efficiency now. I did lots of 4, 6, 8-hour zone 2 rides in the month of December. And almost all of the 310 miles of the Rev 310M was done in zone 2 as well. Okay, so there's the big map. Not important to look at. And then this is the elevation of the ride and the squiggly lines. Now, what I've done is I've removed, I will remove a few things just to keep this chart from looking too dizzying. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take away RPM because it's not important for this discussion. The temperature is the blue, and if we follow that by this line here on the side, you'll see 50 degrees, and you'll see it really never got above that. And I think this is a spike here, 54 degrees. I don't think that's correct. Most of the ride was between 45 and 40 something degree, you know, high 40s. All right, so we're going to take temperature out. That's how you do that. Take that up there, hide it. Miles per hour, also not important to look at. So we're going to hide that as well. So we're left with the elevation chart, heart rate, and power. And I think that's all the information that we really need to look at this. And now what I will also do is smooth that out so it's not so spiky. And now you get to see a much clearer picture of the elevation graph and heart rate up here and power here. All right, so the next thing I wish to do is to show you from the start to rainbow. That 4.5 hours or so. So there you see it, normalized power of 170, about 5,500 feet of gain. And if you remember from the full 8-hour picture, that was 168 normalized power. So only really 2-watt difference in the first half to what the total 8 hours. And that's proper pacing. You just want to keep things chill, right? You know, 4,000 kilojoules. If you look, you'll see it's about 71 for the IF. Okay, so that's 71% of my FTP. I felt fine. The variability index, you see it says 1.17. So that's about 17% variability. And of course, there's a lot of climbing on the front end. So that will vary your power from, like, let's say just a sustained effort on a climb. And that's what you'll see too. If you look at a, you know, 10-minute climb, 1-hour climb, whatever, If you keep your power consistent, then your variability index will show very, very little. It'll show like a 1.01 or 1.02 if you pace properly.
It's 2 o'clock.
And it's 2 o'clock. All right, now that was the first 69 miles, heart rate of 141. And, you know, this is important to look at because if you're trying to fuel while doing an endurance event, it's going to be really hard to digest if you're in the high heart rate, you know, riding at threshold throughout an endurance event. And if you have to, you know, I don't know, I recommend people use more liquid fuel, but I was using a lot of solid fuel in the form of these tiny little sandwiches with the ham, cream cheese on a Hawaiian roll. And that's what I was using for fueling. They're really small, pretty much can fit the whole sandwich in my mouth. Maybe one bite, one swallow of fluid, and just kind of keep it moist and then start chewing it. Usually at the top of a climb, right about to do a descent. Okay, the next thing I wish to show you is the difference between lap 1, which is the first 69 miles, and then the second part of the ride, which was Rainbow to the finish. Now, there is a decrease in normalized power and heart rate as well, and that's, again, because we were off the front, so what was the point of riding any harder than we had to? But also, you know, Barbara was kind of falling off the wheel, so we had to slow down a little bit. Lori was having some issues because she couldn't take on any more fuel. She was just so cold. She just couldn't squeeze the bottle, and so much wind, she couldn't even take her hands off the bars. So a lot of reasons why we had to slow down a bit, but you know, that's just the way it is. But if that is what you need to do to stay ahead of everyone else, then it's fine. There's no major issue. You'll notice that my max heart rate, you know, 158 on the second half of the ride. If you look at the first part of the ride, 160 max heart rate. So you just really, I mean, my max heart rate is 180, 185 or more. And just kept the lid on it, as they say. Another thing I sometimes do is I do the ride in thirds. And you can just see here, if you just look at it in thirds, you know, 171, 168, and 164. Sure, there's a little bit of decline, but again, if you just want to stay ahead of everyone else, and that's all you need to do to stay ahead of anyone else, that's all the power you need to put out. And heart rate wise, the same. So that's, you know, that's kind of the important things to take away. Also, it's just funny because if you are from somewhere else and you are invited to ride in San Diego, people always talk about this climb here, and that's called Torrey Pines. Let me see if I can get a good representation. Actually, so sometimes what you have to do is you have to save and close this app and then start over, because for some reason it starts to get glitchy. So let's open that up again. And we're going to scroll down here, back to the graph, and go back to distance. And then what we'll do is we're going to zoom this in first. And then right here, there's a climb in San Diego, and it's called Torrey Pines, because it's right where the Torrey Pines Park is. And this, for whatever reason, always seems to be a climb that everyone was like, oh my God, Torrey Pines. Well, we did this climb at 118 miles into the day, I think. Oh yeah, there it is. 118. And, you know, my average or normalized power for the entire day was, you know, the 170, 168 numbers. And this is the last climb of the day. So, you know, 206 normalized power. So I always think about the last climb as the final exam of a full-on day. And, you know, did I fuel properly? Did I pace properly? Did I burn too many matches during the day? How am I going to deal with the last climb? And, you know, can I make a difference in the way that last climb is being ridden? Am I following wheels, or am I the one that's setting the pace? Am I the one accelerating? Am I the one putting people in the hurt locker? So to me, the last climb, and this is a revism, the last climb is the only one that matters. So if we're looking at the last climb, I felt great. I pushed 30 extra watts than I did the rest of the day, from a 170 normalized power to a 206 normalized power. And I felt fine. I felt great. This was, you know, 7 miles from the finish. Let me just look at my notes real quick to see if there's anything that I didn't cover or should cover. But hey, if you folks have questions, you know, please send me, you know, make comments down below. Let's talk about it. Oh, actually, earlier I was talking about the variability index here. And so on this climb here, for the 9 minutes, 1.3 mile climb, you know, there's the variability index. It's a 1.0, so no variability. I kept the power very even throughout. And, you know, I had to keep looking back because Lori was suffering, so I didn't want to drop her by too much. And she's the better climber of all three of us, but she was suffering. And, but anyway, so intensity factor, about 80%, 86%, I should say. You know, it's only a 5.3, 5.5% grade. So I don't know why there's so much fuss over this climb. And then you can see the heart rate, you know, between, you know, when I hit the bottom of the climb at 135 and then average throughout the climb 145 with a max of 149. So within a 4-beat window for the 9 minutes, just steady, sustained, and controlled effort. Okay, that's all for today. If you've got questions about power data and you'd like for me to cover more stuff, or, you know, provide more detail or less detail, maybe you just want some quick information, just make a comment down below. I might even make another video based on your comment. And, you know, hopefully we're learning and I'm providing valuable content to you. If you found this information relevant, important, earth-shattering, please like and subscribe. Please make a comment, and please share this video with your friends. And I look forward to seeing you up the road.